Book 2. Title 1. Crimes Against National Security and the Law of Nations, Section 1, Treason and Espionage, Art 114. Treason Elements. 1. Offender is a Filipino citizen or an alien resident. 2. There's a war and Philippines is involved. And 3. Offender either A, levies war against the government, or B, adheres to enemies, giving aid or comfort. Notes. Treason, breach of allegiance to the government by a person who owes allegiance to it. Allegiance, obligation of fidelity and obedience which individuals owe to the government under which they live or to their sovereign. In return for protection they receive. Treason is a war crime, punished by state as a measure of self-protection, committed in times of war, not peace, when there is actual hostilities. No need for a declaration of war. Mere acceptance of public office and discharge of official duties under the enemy do not constitute per se the felony of treason. But when the position is policy determining, the acceptance of public office and the discharge of official duties constitute treason. Persons liable. 1. Filipino permanent allegiance can commit treason anywhere. 2. Alien residing temporary allegiance commit treason only while residing in Philippines. Notes. Treason committed in a foreign country may be prosecuted in the Philippines. Art. 2. RPC. Treason by an alien must be committed in the Philippines. EO 44. Ways to commit treason. 1. Levying war against government requires A. Actual assembling of men. B. Purpose of executing a treasonable design by force. 2. Adheres to enemies. Following must concur together. A. Actual adherence. B. Give aid or comfort. Notes. Levying war must be with intent to overthrow the government as such, not merely to repeal a particular statute or to resist a particular officer. Not necessary that those attempting to overthrow the government by force of arms should have the apparent power to succeed in their design. In whole or in part, adherence intellectually or emotionally favors the enemy and harbors sympathies or convictions disloyal to his country's policy or interest. Aid or comfort, Act WC strengthens or tends to strengthen the enemy of the government in the conduct of war against the government, or an Act WC weakens or tends to weaken the power of the government or the country to resist or to attack the enemies of the government or country. Ways to prove. 1. Treason. A. Testimony of at least 2 witnesses to the same overt act. B. Judicial confession of accused. 2. Adherence. A. 1 witness. B. Nature of act itself. C. Circumstances surrounding act. Notes. To convict, testimonies must relate to the same overt act, not 2 similar acts. If act is separable, each witness can testify to parts of it, but the act, as a whole, must be identifiable as an overt act. Confession must be in open court. Reason for 2-witness rule. Special nature of the crime requires that the accused be afforded a special protection not required in other cases so as to avoid a miscarriage of justice. Extreme seriousness of the crime, for which death is one of the penalties provided by law, and the fact that the crime is committed in abnormal times, when small differences may in mortal enmity wipe out all scruples in sacrificing the truth. General notes. Inherent circumstances do not aggravate the crime. Evident premeditation, superior strength, treachery, treason is a continuing crime. Even after the war, offender can still be prosecuted. No treason through negligence since it must be intentional. No complex crime of treason with murder. Murder is the overt act of aid or comfort and is therefore inseparable from treason itself. Defense. Duress or uncontrollable fear. Obedience to de facto government, not defense. Suspended allegiance. Joining the enemy army, thus becoming a citizen of the enemy. Elements of conspiracy. 1. In time of war, 2. Two or more persons come to an agreement to A. Levy war against the government, or B. Adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort. 3. They decide to commit it. Elements of prosopol. 1. In time of war. 2. A person who has decided to levy war against the government, or to adhere to the enemies and to give them aid or comfort. 3. Proposes its execution to some other person. S. General notes. As a general rule, conspiracy and proposal to commit a felony is not punishable. Art. 8. Art 115 is an exception as it specifically penalizes conspiracy and proposal to commit treason. Mere agreement and decision to commit treason is punishable. 2. Witness rule. Not applicable since this is a crime separate from treason. Mere proposal even without acceptance is punishable. 2. If the other accepts, it is already conspiracy. If actual acts of treason are committed after the conspiracy or proposal, the crime committed will be treason, and the conspiracy or proposal is considered as a means in the commission thereof. Art 116. Misprision of treason elements. 1. Offender owes allegiance to the government. 2. Not a foreigner. 3. Has knowledge of any conspiracy to commit treason against the government. 4. He conceals or does not disclose the same to the authorities in WC he resides. Notes. Offender is punished as an accessory to the crime of treason, but is actually principal to this crime. Crime doesn't apply if crime of treason is already committed and it is not reported. It is a crime of omission. RPC. Mentions for individuals, i.e. governor, provincial fiscal, mayor or city fiscal. Art 117. Espionage. Espionage is the offense of gathering, transmitting, or losing information respecting the national defense with intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used to the injury of the Republic of the Philippines or the advantage of a foreign nation. Modes of committing espionage: by entering, without authority, a warship, fort, or military or naval establishment or reservation to obtain any information, plan or other data of confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. Elements. 1. That the offender enters a warship, fort, naval or military establishment or reservation. 2. That he has no authority therefore, and 3. That his purpose is to obtain information, plans, photographs or other data of a confidential nature relative to the defense of the Philippines. 2. By disclosing to the representative of a foreign nation the contents of the articles, data or information referred to in the preceding paragraph, which he had in his possession by reason of the public office he holds. Elements. 1. That the offender is a public officer. 2. That he has in his possession the articles, data or information referred to in the first mode of committing espionage, by reason of the public office he holds, and 3. That he discloses their contents to a representative of a foreign nation. Persons liable. 1. First mode, A Filipino, B alien residing. 2. Second mode, A offender is a public officer. Notes. Being a public officer is a requirement in the second paragraph. It is aggravating in the first. General notes. Espionage is the offense of gathering, transmitting, or losing information respecting the national defense with the intent or reason to believe that the information is to be used to the injury of the Philippines or the advantage of any foreign nation. It is not conditioned on citizenship. Wiretapping is not espionage if the purpose is not connected with the defense. In the first mode of committing the felony, it is not necessary that the offender succeeds in obtaining the information. Treason versus espionage. In both, it is not conditioned by citizenship of offender. In treason, it is limited in two ways of committing crime: levying war, and adhering to the enemy, giving him aid or comfort. Whereas espionage is committed in many ways. CA number 616. An act to punish espionage and other offenses against national security acts punishable. 1. Unlawfully obtaining or permitting to be obtained information affecting national defense. 2. Unlawful disclosing of information affecting national defense. 3. Disloyal acts or words in time of peace, i.e. causing in any manner insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny or refusal of duty of any member of the military, naval, or air forces of the Philippines. 4. Disloyal acts in time of war. 5. Conspiracy to commit the foregoing acts. 6. Harboring or concealing violators of the law, i.e. the offender harbors a person whom he knows is someone who committed or is about to commit a violation of this act. And 7. Photographing from aircraft of vital military information. Section 2. Provoking war and disloyalty in case of war. Art 118. Inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals. Elements. 1. Offender performs unlawful or unauthorized acts. 2. Such acts provoke or give occasion for war involving or liable to involve the Philippines or expose Filipino citizens to reprisals on their persons or property. Notes. Crime is committed in time of peace. Intent of the offender is immaterial. In inciting to war, the offender is any person. If the offender is a public officer, the penalty is higher. Reprisals are not limited to military action. It could be economic reprisals, or denial of entry into their country. Example: X burns Chinese flag. If China bans the entry of Filipinos into China, that is reprisal. Art 119. Violation of neutrality. Elements. 1. That there is war in which the Philippines is not involved. 2. That there is a regulation issued by competent authority for the purpose of enforcing neutrality. And 3. That the offender violates such regulation. Notes. This crime is committed only in time of war. Neutrality of the Philippines that was violated. There has to be a regulation issued by competent authority for enforcement of neutrality. Offender violated it, being a public officer or employee, has higher penalty. Art 120. Correspondence with hostile country. Elements. 1. There's a war and Philippines is involved. 2. That the offender makes correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops. 3. That the correspondence is either A. prohibited by the government, or B. carried on in ciphers or conventional signs, or C. containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy. Qualifying circumstances. 1. Notice or information might be useful to the enemy. 2. Offender intended to aid the enemy. Notes. Circumstances qualifying the offense. 1. Notice or information might be useful to the enemy. 2. Offender intended to aid the enemy. A hostile country exists only during hostilities or after the declaration of war. Correspondence to enemy country is correspondence to officials of enemy country even if said official is related to the offender. It is not correspondence with private individual in enemy country. If ciphers were used, no need for prohibition of the government. If ciphers were not used, there is a need for prohibition of the government. It is immaterial if correspondence contains innocent matters. If prohibited, correspondence is punishable. Art 121. Flight to enemy's country. Elements. 1. There's a war and Philippines is involved. 2. Offender owes allegiance to the government. 3. Offender attempts to flee or go to enemy country. And 4. Going to enemy country is prohibited by competent authority. Persons liable. 1. Filipino citizen 2. Alien residing in the Philippines. Notes: mere attempt consummates the crime. There must be a prohibition. If there is none, even if one went to enemy country, there is no crime? An alien resident may be held guilty for this crime because an alien owes allegiance to the Philippine government, albeit temporary. Section 3. Piracy and mutiny on the high seas. Art. 122. Piracy in general and mutiny on the high seas. Piracy modes to commit. 1. By attacking or seizing a vessel on the high seas or in the Philippine waters. PD 532. 2. By seizing the whole or part of the cargo of said vessels, its equipment or personal belongings of its complement or passengers, the offenders being strangers to the vessels. Piracy: it is robbery or forcible depredation on the high seas, without lawful authority and done with animo rendian in the spirit and intention of universal hostility. Mutiny: the unlawful resistance to a superior, or the raising of commotions and disturbances on board a ship against the authority of its commander. Elements of piracy. 1. A vessel is on the high seas or Philippine waters. 2. Offenders, not members of its complement nor passengers of the vessel. And 3. That the offenders, A. attack or seize vessel, if committed by crew or passengers. The crime is not piracy but robbery in the high seas, or B. seize whole or part of a vessel's cargo, equipment or personal belongings of its complement or passengers. Notes: high seas: any waters on the sea coast which are without the boundaries of the low water mark, although such waters may be in the jurisdictional limits of a foreign government. Parts of the sea that are not included in the exclusive economic zone, in the territorial seas, or in the internal waters of a state, or in the archipelagic waters of an archipelagic state. United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Philippine waters, all bodies of water, such as but not limited to seas, gulfs, bays, around, between and connecting each of the islands of the Philippine archipelago, irrespective of its depth, breadth, length or dimension, and all waters belonging to the Philippines by historic or legal title, including territorial sea, the seabed, the insular shelves, and other submarine areas over which the Philippines has sovereignty and jurisdiction. Sec. 2, PD number 532, now, Art. 122, as amended by RE 7659. Piracy and mutiny in Philippine waters is punishable. Before RE 7659 amended Art. 122, piracy and mutiny only on the high seas was punishable. However, the commission of the acts described in Arts 122 and 123 in Philippine waters was under PD number 532. Piracy in high seas jurisdiction of any court where offenders are found or arrested. Piracy in internal waters jurisdiction of Philippine courts. For purposes of the anti-fencing law, piracy is part of robbery and theft. Piracy versus mutiny. Piracy is robbery or forcible degradation on the high seas, without lawful authority and done with animo rendian in the spirit and intention of universal hostility, whereas mutiny is unlawful resistance to a superior officer, or the raising of commotion and disturbances on board a ship against the authority of its commander. Intent to gain is an element of piracy, whereas intent to gain is not an element of mutiny. Piracy is an attack from outside. Offenders are strangers to the vessel. Mutiny is an attack from the inside. Piracy versus robbery on high seas. In piracy, the offender is an outsider, while in robbery on high seas, the offender is a member of the complement or a passenger of the vessel. In both, there is intent to gain and the manner of committing the crime is the same. Within Philippine waters, in Art. 122, RPC, offender is an outsider. In PD 532, Anti-Piracy. Offender is crew or passenger. PD 532, Anti-Piracy and Anti-Highway Robbery Law of 1974, Vessel. Any vessel or watercraft used for transport of passengers and cargo or B. For fishing. Aiding or abetting piracy requisites. 1. Knowingly aids or protects pirates. 2. Acquires or receives property taken by such pirates, or in any manner derives any benefit. 3. Directly or indirectly abets the commission of piracy. Note: under PD 532, piracy may be committed even by a passenger or member of the complement of the vessel. Art 123. Qualified piracy qualifying circumstances. 1. Seizure of the vessel by boarding or firing upon the same. 2. Abandonment of victims without means of saving themselves. Or 3. Piracy was accompanied by murder, homicide, physical injuries, or rape. Notes: parricide infanticide should be included. According to Judge Pimentel, there is a conflict between this provision and the provision on rape. If rape is committed on someone below 7 years old, penalty is death under the new rape law. But if rape committed on someone below 7 during the time of piracy, reclusion perpetua to death. The murder, rape, homicide, physical injuries must have been committed on the passengers or on the complement of the vessel. Piracy is a crime not against any particular state but against all mankind. It may be punished in the competent tribunal of any country where the offender may be found or into which he may be carried. Qualified piracy, a special complex crime punishable by reclusion perpetua to death, regardless of the number of victims. RA number 6235 Anti-Hijacking Law Acts punishable by compelling a change in the course or destination of an aircraft to Philippine registry, or seizing or usurping the control thereof while it is in flight. By compelling an aircraft of foreign registry to land in Philippine territory or seizing or usurping the control thereof while it is in the said territory, and by shipping, loading, or carrying in any passenger aircraft operating as a public utility W in the Philippines, any explosive, flammable, corrosive or poisonous substance or material. In flight, from the moment all exterior doors are closed following embarkation until the same doors are again opened for disembarkation. Notes: Attorney Palacios. Where the aircraft is of Philippine registry, the offense must be committed while in flight. Hence, the act must take place after all exterior doors are closed following embarkation. Where the aircraft is of foreign registry, offense need not take place while in flight. Qualifying circumstances par 1 and 2. 1. Firing upon the pilot, member of the crew or passenger of the aircraft. 2. Exploding or attempting to explode any bomb or explosive to destroy the aircraft. Or 3. The crime is accompanied by murder, homicide, serious physical injuries, or rape. Notes: Attorney Palacios. For firing upon to qualify the offense, the offender must have actually fired his weapon. Mere attempt is not enough. For firing upon to qualify the offense, the offender need not succeed in hitting the pilot, crew member or passenger.